Welcome back, you guys. Right now, we are going to talk about 3 practical ways to build self discipline into the heart of your child. I'm going to start out by reading a scripture in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 25 through 27. It says, "Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." We go into strict training as Christians, and as parents, we have to train our children. So the first way that we want to talk about today about building self-discipline into your child is by creating schedules and routines for your children. As you know, I like to talk about sleep training, and which leads to different disciplines in a baby's life, like blanket time, playpen time, room time, all of those different times that we like to talk about. But it's not just for the purpose of having a schedule throughout the day. It's for the purpose of teaching your children self-control or self-discipline. Another word I like to use for self-discipline is self-control. I use that word in my home a lot. All of my kids know what I mean when I say, "Are you having self-control?" Because I think it's truly one of the most important things we can be teaching our children. I see a lot of kids growing up right now in this world that really struggle in the area of self-control. When a lot of kids get told no, and I'm not including my children in that. When a lot of kids get told no, it's very difficult for them to respond in a positive way. And so we want to teach our children how to have self-discipline or self-control, whether they're told no or yes or maybe or wait or later or whatever it may be. So starting with scheduling out your child's day with sleep training, like I said, playpen time is the next area you can start teaching your child, putting them in a playpen, giving them a few toys, setting that boundary and saying you have to stay in this area for a certain amount of time, and when that timer goes off or whatever it may be, I'm going to come and I'm going to get you and say you did such a good job. And that's just the very beginning of teaching your child how to be a self-disciplined person. It really starts right from the beginning. I know a lot of moms complain or ask for advice about, what do I do when my baby is just constantly wanting to be held and constantly wanting to be in the front pack or backpack or whatever it may be. And I always say, are you teaching them playpen time? Are you teaching them blanket time? Are you teaching them how to have that independent, structured time away from mom or away from dad, so they know how to build that discipline in their lives? And I know it sounds crazy for some people, like how are you teaching a baby to stay in a little square? But they're very capable of doing that. I've seen it over and over and over again, how you can teach a baby how to stay in a little square and play with toys for an hour. And I know especially during dinner time, that's when I always find it the hardest with my little ones to feel like I have that time just to prepare dinner and kind of be alone. I like to be alone during that time. And so I'll usually have some sort of structure set up for my kids during that time so that I can just focus and even just have a little peace and quiet. And so those structured times have really helped me too as a parent, and I know that it's helping my children. I see it when they, like we talked about in our first lesson, when my kids come home from school, they know that they need to get their homework done right away, and then they don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day. And that's a discipline we have created in our home, and now I don't even have to worry about it. I know a lot of parents are like, how do you get your kids to do their homework? And I'm like, I don't even think about it very much. They just come home and they do their homework. The first few months of that training was a little bit more difficult, but when I became consistent and just really focused in on that, it's not a problem anymore in our lives.
Yeah, and Austin wrote a whole micro book. It's a guidebook online. It's called Shape Your Baby's Character, where she talks about these ideas about building routines in depth. So head to parachutmom.com and you can get it there. And it's great lessons for moms and dads, even though it's on the Parachute Mom website. Really what she's talking about, this creating schedules and routines for your children, it really is attached to a mindset. And that mindset is really simple but really powerful. It's the mindset that your family does not revolve around your child. Your lives don't revolve around your kid. In fact, your lives should revolve around Jesus, and ultimately the whole family is one central unit. And so you do things as a family that's best for everyone, not just let's sacrifice everything for the kid. And that sounds a little harsh, but the reason that that's important is that your kid does not or should not be the one to create the routine, to create the schedule. Because one, they don't know the best way to create a schedule, and two, they're not going to feel as secure when they're just doing whatever they want. They don't know what's good for them. You're the parent. You're the one who's been through life. You've seen ups and downs. You've lived through making good choices and really bad ones if you're anything like me. And so you need to create a schedule for your children. And a lot of what we deal with is younger families, but this works for older families as well, or older kids as well. If your kids are spending too much time playing video games or on the internet or whatever it may be, create a new structure for them. Sit them down and say, hey, there's a new schedule. You're not allowed to spend X amount of time doing video games or whatever it may be. I'm going to change when and how you get to do that. And there will be pushback at first, but if you're consistent with it, they're going to appreciate it. It's going to help you a lot. So the first of the 3 practical ways we want to share today to create self-discipline, to build self-discipline in your child, is to create schedules and routines for your children. If you haven't written that down, write it down. Here's number 2. When correcting poor behavior, be consistent. Write it down, underline it, be consistent when correcting poor behavior. We like to say, don't be a Chihuahua parent. What's a Chihuahua parent? Well, Chihuahuas are infamous for just bark, 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 and no bite. My aunt and uncle, they had a dog. His name was Griffey. And Griffey would just bark, bark, bark. You'd open up the door, yap, 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 all day long. But guess what? Griffey was the most scaredy dog on the face of the planet. He would never hurt a fly. He would run away from the smallest thing. We don't want to be that kind of parent. We don't want to be Chihuahua parents that we say, you know what, if you don't do this, you're going to be grounded. If you don't do this, you're going to get whatever the discipline may be. You fill in the blank. Whatever works with your children to help guide them. But you don't want to be the parent that just says, I'm going to discipline, I'm going to discipline, I'm going to discipline, because you're bark, 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 and no bite. You need to follow through the first time that you inform your child that there's a discipline attached to an incorrect, poor behavior. And this is really the process you want to follow. Okay? So here's what you do. Let's say it's a first-time offense, something you've never talked about before. Let's say it's something like climbing on the bookshelf. You've never seen your kid do this before. All of a sudden, they're climbing on a bookshelf. You need to stop them. You don't discipline them right then and there, but you do a form of discipline, which is called setting the expectation. And I would write that down. Set the expectation. Make it clear. Look them in the eyes. Johnny, you're not allowed to climb the bookshelf. You give them the reason why. Maybe the reason why is because mom and dad said so. That's a good enough reason in a lot of instances. But you might also say, because it's dangerous, it could hurt you, you could fall, whatever those reasons are, and you have your child repeat it back to you. And then you've set an expectation. They understand, Dad does not want me to climb on the bookshelf. In fact, you tell them what will happen the next time they do it. Look them in the eyes and say, Johnny, the next time that you climb on the bookshelf, I'm going to take away all of your Legos for the rest of the day. You're not going to play with any Legos. And I know you have Lego time later because you set a routine for them. So you're going to take away Lego time and they're going to have to do something else that they don't like as much. So you make it clear. You give them the reason why. And here's an important part. You want to give them the moral reason why this is wrong. Again, it might be wrong because mom and dad said so. Honor your father and mother. That's a moral reason why. And maybe you don't have to go into great detail with that, especially if they're a lot younger. You don't have to worry about that. But let's say the situation is they're being disrespectful, to an adult, and they might not know it, or maybe they do know it. You correct them, and then you teach them, hey, you know what? We honor age. We honor people. We don't be disrespectful to adults or to kids. And you give them the moral reason why. So again, set the expectation, make it clear, have them repeat it back to you, give them the reason why. If there's a moral reason beyond because mom and dad said so, teach them that moral reason. Why does Jesus say this is wrong? And then, if applicable, you want to teach them what to do next time. So in the case of the bookshelf, you're going to say, hey, next time you feel like you want to climb the bookshelf, Johnny, don't climb the bookshelf. You're not allowed to do it. Now let's say you've explained all that. You've set the expectation. This is, and your day goes along, and you see Johnny. You look at him, he looks at you. He starts putting his hands on the shelf, looks back at you, and then he starts trying to climb the bookshelf again. Okay, this is a second offense, and what you want to do is you want to follow through on your consequence. You told him you'd take away Lego time? Take away Lego time. Whatever the discipline may be, follow through. Okay, they may at this point flip out. Because kids don't like to have things taken away from them, they don't like discipline. No one likes discipline at the time. It's not pleasant at the time, but it will reap a harvest of righteousness in your child's soul. And so what you want to do is allow them a chance to calm down, get them to calm down, maybe give them space to have self-control. So, and I like to say to them, what we do is we say, I'm going to give you time to gain self-control. I put them down. A lot of times we do our discipline in the bathroom, and so we'll just have them sit down on a stool that's in the bathroom, and we'll leave the room, and then we'll come back when they've calmed down. Now you have their attention again because they're done flipping out, and it's just what they do. And depending on the age, if they're 2 or 3, you could tell them the moral reason why. Maybe if they're 4, tell them the moral reason why. Explain to them. You don't have to explain it in detail and depth. You don't have to explain it as a scholar would, but simply explain to them the moral reason why you've disciplined them. Johnny, it's dangerous to climb on the bookshelf, right? But if they're older than, say, 4, 5, 6, if they're that age or older, ask them, why do you think I'm disciplining you? Well, not only is it dangerous, and they should repeat back to you, because I didn't listen to mom and dad. That's another moral reason why. And so have this conversation with them. This is really important, because punishment just says, I'm going to slap you on the hand and send you off, and you're done. And you should fear from now on. And you're punished. You should feel guilty and ashamed. You don't want to punish your children. Going back to our first lesson, we want to discipline them. So you got to have this dialogue with your children. Even at young ages, you got to take time to dialogue with them. So walk them through a process of forgiveness after you've had this conversation, especially when they're real young, but even as they get older, talk to them. Say, hey, I have a little 2-year-old at home, Judah, and I say, hey, Judah, are you sorry to Daddy for not listening? And he might not be, or maybe he is, but we get there and we work through it. And I look him in the eyes, tear-filled eyes, I'm sorry, Daddy. And I give him a hug. And I tell him that I love him so much, and that there's nothing that could change that. Your kids need to know you love them. This has all got to be wrapped in their understanding that mom and dad will never stop loving them. And then you complete that moment of reconciliation, give them a hug, and then you move on. Maybe you mention one more time, hey, make sure that you don't do that again, Johnny, Judah, whoever. And so, again, that's a real, deep dive, practical look at what it looks like to walk them through offenses, first offense, second offense. If there's a third offense, you would repeat that second offense process again, and you might have to get more strict. You might have to set a new expectation. Maybe your expectations or your discipline are ineffective. Create an expectation and a discipline that's going to help your child follow the behavior that you know is good for them. And it will help them, and it will change their heart and their mindset. And so when correcting poor behavior, you got to be consistent. You got to follow through.
Yeah, and something I wanted to add to that is when you're correcting that poor behavior through discipline, it's always it's for the moment, but it's also for the future. You're always thinking towards the future. It's not just about, okay, you did something you shouldn't have done, and I didn't want you to do that, and so I'm going to discipline you. Discipline is thinking about it happening again, and you not wanting that behavior to happen again. And so that kind of discipline really does take time, and that's why it's so important that you're asking your child, why did you just get disciplined? Do you know why I disciplined you? And sometimes our kids will say, no, I don't know why, because they don't truly understand what they've done wrong. And so that gives us the opportunity to then talk to them and explain, this is what you did, and this is why it was wrong. Or sometimes they say, well, it's because I did this, and it's like, well, that was part of the reason, but really it's because you did this thing. And so it really exposes there might be a misunderstanding, and that they don't even really know why they're being disciplined. And then if you just let that go, that discipline is almost useless. It's almost pointless, because they don't even know what they did wrong. They just know, like, I did something wrong, and hopefully I don't do that again. Instead, you're teaching your child what they did wrong and how to change that behavior. And our third and last point is, when training good behavior, be consistent. So not only is it important to be consistent when correcting that poor behavior, but when training good behavior, you need to be consistent. Just like in sleep training, that's training good behavior. It's so the biggest key is to be consistent. And something I know I've shared about is, we have our kids say yes mom and yes dad. So we say, hey, can you go unload the dishwasher? Yes mom is the required response for that. And for so many different reasons, mostly so that we know that they heard us and that they're being respectful in their response back to us by saying yes mom. And if they say it with a bad attitude, then they could get in trouble for that. So when training good behavior, be consistent. An example that I have from just recently is our almost 9-year-old. We've taught from the time she could talk yes mom, yes dad, and our 7-year-old, 4-year-old, and now our 2-year-old has seen his older siblings saying yes mom and yes dad, and those have been some of his first phrases that he's been able to say is yes mom and yes dad, because it's so consistent in our home that it's something that he already knows to do, which is awesome. Because when training our first child, I felt like, oh my goodness, is she ever going to learn how to respond with yes mom and yes dad? And now it's become a lot more consistent in our home. Yep. But it takes a lot of work. And even now our older kids will sometimes not remember to say yes mom and yes dad, and I'll have to say, I'll give them a look, or and that usually triggers it. Or I'll say, hey, what do you say? Yes mom, yes dad. And so it's just so important that you're consistent no matter what you're disciplining in, whether you're disciplining poor behavior, you're disciplining good behavior. Consistency is the key.
Absolutely. And as Austin's saying, we want to train good behavior, not just correct poor behavior. Because if we become parents that are just correcting poor behavior, then we end up being reactive parents. We start heading towards fear and punishment instead of love and discipline. And so really what we're trying to get across the table here is to be intentional. Be intentional. Be looking for those moments where you can train good behavior and be consistent with it. Be looking for, oh, you know what? There's some poor behavior, or even more importantly, there's a poor mindset, a poor attitude behind the poor behavior. You really want to be looking for that. Look for the heart to change, not just for the outward behavior. And really teaching this self-discipline, teaching self-control, and disciplining your children really has to do with helping build a good, godly character in their hearts. And so that's what you want to do. And this brings us to the conclusion of our micro series here, our micro lessons on the love of discipline. It's important that we discipline our kids because we are raising up not just kids, but disciples, mature followers of Jesus Christ. And so if you're looking for more information, you can head to parachutemom.com And it's been an honor for me to join my wife and be able to talk about these things, because it is important that both husbands and wives, both mom and dad, are involved with discipline. But yeah, what else? And they can connect with Austin. You guys should connect with Austin if you haven't already on her Instagram page. She's always sending out amazing pointers and tips, and just sharing a lot of good information. And so where can they find that?
Parachute Mom.
At Parachute Mom on Instagram. Yeah. It's pretty simple. But yeah, it's been fun hanging out with you guys, and be blessed.